All right, so very good morning. Lawrence, your point is well taken, but it's just been the norm that we have been waiting for 3 minutes, but I completely get what you're saying that, everybody else is on time. Yeah, but, appreciate everybody taking the time out. Happy Wednesday. So we'll continue with our, updates on where version 3 is headed, as well as some of the regular product updates that we share anyway on the Wednesday call. So with that, Shiva, please can you take it away? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Srikanth. Good morning, everyone. So I'm going to quickly walk through some of the significant updates basically in the current product and plus essentially what we are doing with V3. And it's something that we are basically working very hard on. And basically we have a few updates over there so we can actually show stuff to you. So first and foremost, like when we talked about assessment some time back, right? If you remember, we basically started with one assessment and we kind of put that structure together. Today, basically, we started with Cyber Essentials, then we essentially delivered a PCI DSS. Now we essentially have the complete HIPAA assessment, which you can essentially do from here. And again, with every assessment that we add. And so the next one is basically the FADP compliance, which has now become a standard. So essentially this compliance assessment has essentially been also added. So this essentially talks more about personal data and basically how you're protecting personal data. So that essentially is the FADP standard. And basically this is the NYDFS standard, which is yet another standard, which is basically specific to the I think some of the businesses basically in a certain area. Pardon? Okay, so what we are doing with all of the assessments and so all of these standards, compliance standards that we are bringing in. So what you're seeing more as a theme is that one is essentially we kind of automate the measurement.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. We automate the means by which we can essentially kind of fetch all the data from different systems, and that was essentially the reporting that we are doing. But if you look at any of the standards that we basically go through, you can essentially understand that there are a lot of things which are essentially things which are policies, procedures, and also certain undertakings that each of the organizations have to give. So in those cases, so for example, basically, there are cases where you basically have to give evidence of training programs being done, and those programs may not be exactly being done on machines, etc. It may be on a different system. So with that in mind, what we've done is that we've essentially kind of given you the ability to actually pull out those data and start uploading the evidence. Now, one of the things that I've been discussing with my CISO Krishna is essentially how do we essentially get this to be automated almost, say, for example, can we get it to the 80-20 rule where 80% of it is automated? So today, when I look at the entire automation that we are doing for most of these standards, we are probably at around 40%, 45%. And basically that gives a little bit of relief, but it is not complete. Now, when you think about a lot of these things, which essentially we are doing, one of the things that always comes into play is that what can we do to essentially kind of automate certain things that we are putting together? So one of the things that we are working on is essentially building a lot of integration. So let me explain what these integrations mean. So for example, if you're going to be using a standard LMS, which is basically to deliver your security training. So the concept is that we will basically build an integration into those LMS systems to pull the training records of the employees and then attach them as evidence into these systems. Second, if you essentially have certain systems where you have basically implemented certain controls. And so let's take, for example, your HRMS system, right? So if you are basically, so we are basically working on we are looking for feedback. So we want to understand, for example, in the MSP space, what is being used as the HRMS system. Do people use things like Workday, Monday, etc.? In that case, we will integrate with them and pull back into information that is required from the HRMS system into this. So we are working towards how we can essentially make this more robust in terms of So today, if you look at it, we have as I said, 40% of it, and the remaining is data that you're pulling manually into this whole thing. But anything that you are pulling manually essentially is an effort, and is basically, again, you're pulling from one system, copying, pasting it here, and then you're getting a report out of it. And again, that is not the best use of your time. So the concept is that what we're going to do is we're going to build a matrix of the different types of systems that will provide this kind of information. And if you have any of those systems, we will basically start integrating with those systems so that we can pull this data back into this whole thing. So that's essentially something that we're working on. And but that's not going to be instant, but this is basically how we look at it from a feedback perspective. That is, when we look at our own work in terms of what we are doing, this is what we feel that is the gap. And this is what we need to address in order to get this together. Because presenting a set of questions and answers is the easy part, right? The point is that how do you make this content relevant, and how do you make this content accurate and make it basically as less touched by humans as is possible, is what we have to focus on. Okay. So as I said, basically we have all of these new compliances that we basically added. Second is that when we talk about any of the compliances, like one of the things that was asked is that when I go into an asset, I essentially need to know, especially from CIS, whether I'm IG1 compliant or IG2 compliant or IG3 compliant. And so the sub filters basically over there has been put. But in the new platform, we essentially have handled this a little differently. And you will essentially see that come into the new platform, where we essentially have a separate field which is called maturity, right? So different standards, it's not just CIS. So if you take, like for example, the Cyber Essentials, or if you take Essential 8, they all define certain maturity standards. So they basically will say that you're a starter to basically expert. So there are different maturity levels there. So we classify a separate field called maturity, and then we've essentially classified that into different standards. Now, certain standards like PCI DSS, etc., will not have multiple maturity levels. So in which case it will be one standard level. In all the other cases, basically this maturity level has been incorporated into the tool, so that you can essentially kind of measure your benchmark against each of the maturity levels. Now, one of the biggest things that you're going to see from a compliance perspective, which is completely changing, and is one of the reasons for why a lot of work has been done this time with the entire compliance piece, especially in the new framework, is because if you look at most of the tools that are out there, what they essentially do is they take the NIST 853 standard, or they take the CIS standard, and then they essentially do a cross linking of that particular compliance to all of the other standards. Now, this was an approach that we essentially followed in this version of the product, that is the first version of the product. But we are completely changing this around in the next version of the product, because we understand that, for example, the interpretation of certain controls, the way it is described in standard 1 is not the same interpretation in standard 2. And the scope of the interpretation is basically not exact. And so what happens is, in some cases, we are actually giving you, people will end up giving you kind of a false picture in all of those cases. So what we've been working on, and I've kind of shown you earlier before, is that we've built a complete set of checks. And now these checks also include things like running commands like auditpol.exe or secpol.exe to essentially kind of pull specific values from various categories and subcategories within the system. And because we now have this 900 plus checks, which basically we are able to execute on any system. And again, the whole thing has to be classified based on whether it's being run on a desktop or it's being run on a server. And again, when you take a server, basically whether it's a 2012 and pre-2012 server or a post-2012 server, these are different standards and substandards that basically are coming out as we essentially delve deeper. So, but what I'm happy about is the fact that while we basically are working through this process and have gotten all this data into the system, the concept is that it will basically give very accurate information in terms of how each asset is doing from a compliance perspective, your overall compliance measurements, and the complete automation to the level possible where we can integrate with multiple systems. That's essentially kind of where we are heading with this entire piece. Then the next one was basically from a notifications perspective. Earlier, we essentially had a question of saying that, okay, yeah, I want basically ticket, you want to be having tickets only for certain specific things, right? So you want to tickets for 0.95 or 0.85. So basically for what EPSS levels do you actually want a ticket on? Second is that we also have the ability to essentially kind of define what which of these tickets will essentially go into which service board and with what severity. These essentially can be modified on the go. So that is basically the second piece that we have basically inserted here, and that will continue into the new platform. One of the things that we have to be cognizant as we basically kind of deploy across multiple geographies, etc. We basically see a lot of people asking for different date formats, and so you can essentially set up the date format in one location, and it basically reflects everywhere throughout the portal. One of the requests that was made is that in case of a lightweight agent, some people didn't want it to run an AD audit scan. So essentially, you have the ability to disable an AD audit scan if you basically don't want to run an AD audit scan on top of that device. And then again, the ability to delete multiple assets at the same time. So this was there. And this is one of the things that I think was critical. So I've been watching a lot of things that Patrick and other people have been posting in terms of the new visualizations and all of the cool stuff that they're essentially trying to put together for people to understand cybersecurity. And I believe that we're trying to do the same thing over here in terms of while basically there are a lot of visualizations which are from a cybersecurity perspective, from a global perspective, how does it apply to you? So the whole concept is we bring this back in here and show you, for example, in your CISA vulnerabilities, how is it affecting you? So we have a CISA vulnerabilities dashboard at a company level, and again, also at a global level, so that you can essentially look at it from a global level as well as from a company level. The same thing. Now you want to know the efficiency of your patching and basically what is the status of different patches that was essentially executed. So you have basically all the details of all the automatic patching that has been done, what is successful, what is not successful, and then also what was the manual patching which was done, what was successful, what was not successful. All of that basically put in over here. Now, again, we have dashboards which essentially visualizations which actually show you that how many assets have been patched, how many unpatched assets exist across companies and by applications. And what are the applications that are getting patched very quickly, and what are basically the applications which are not getting patched quick enough. So all of that is essentially kind of put in over here. And then what are the app updates which are pending across assets? What are the app updates which are basically supposed to be done manually? All of that data is basically kind of put together so that you can essentially kind of view your velocity of your teams in terms of getting these patches up to speed. So all this for both the company view as well as at a global level, so that you can essentially measure these SLAs both from across the customers that you deal with or with certain specific customers. Okay. And then one of the things that was asked is basically you want to see the risk score historic trend. So again, you have the historic trend of your risk score basically across a period of time. And then this essentially also you can see it basically in the what was it in the first scan, what is the latest scan, and how was it basically progressed. All of that stuff you can see it on a per asset basis. You can see it on a company basis. We don't have global basis in the current portal, but we essentially have global basis on the new portal. So that's essentially something that's there. And then we have a number of days by which asset basically has to be kept for before it becomes deprecated. So you can basically say that if it is not discovered for X number of days, then it goes to deprecated. After deprecated, when does it get deleted? So that essentially can be defined out here. And then what we also have is that we've added a whole bunch of new set of widgets just in case you need the custom reports for all of the Azure Active Directory pieces, including Azure AD logs, licenses, user groups, users, all of this data essentially is visible over there. And then you essentially we also have basically enabled downloading reports for specific periods of time. So you can choose a start date, end date, and download a bunch of reports. So if you basically don't want essentially the report as of that date, but you want it between two time periods, which are basically earlier, you can get reports only for that time period. So, and this goes back almost to up to 6 months of data that we retain. And in case you have any special needs because of which you have to retain data for longer, please let us know and we can basically enable that for you. We just have to basically make sure that you have the additional cost taken care of, so that we will essentially kind of give this thing. We also have the complete set of reports for CISA vulnerabilities which are available, so that in just in case, and these are basically what we're talking about. CISA vulnerabilities are, these are CISA notified vulnerabilities, which basically say that this is basically either under active attack or is basically very close to getting under active attack. Now, so that essentially is what the CISA vulnerabilities are. Now, what we are doing, so now, if you really look at it, we are adding multi-dimensional ways in which you look at a particular vulnerability. Right now, you have CVSS scores, which is CVSS 2.x and 3.x. Now you have EPSS score. Now CISA has come up with its own rating algorithm. So what do we do in terms of all of these things which are brought together? So the way that we are essentially redesigning it in the new product is that you make a choice. You can essentially kind of view this whole data either based on CISA score, or you can look at it as from EPSS score perspective, or you want to look at CVSS score, you can look at it from CVSS score perspective. Or if you want to basically kind of have a hybrid of the three, you can have the hybrid of the three. But the concept is that we are kind of opening this up right now to basically say that you can look at it from any perspective. Our precedence is basically we look at all the CISA vulnerabilities as the first set of things, because that's a very active group that's looking at what is happening and what is going on. And the second premise that we essentially give is EPSS, because while EPSS looks at active vulnerabilities, it also is basically it's an algorithm which basically has to still be tuned, and basically a lot of times you get EPSS scores of 0.9 on things which basically are really never exploited, right? So then we may basically run into problems. Whereas with CISA, the good thing is that when it sees the first exploitation, that's when they essentially kind of push these things out. So we're able to kind of correlate with that. And the CVSS score exists because it is basically what is the inherent score of that particular vulnerability. And so we will essentially be incorporating that. So if anything is with CVSS score 9 and above, it is better hygiene that you essentially patch it. And that's basically what it is, whether it's being exploited or not exploited, but some exploit could be fairly easily written and probably basically reach the system. So that's essentially what that is about. And then, of course, we have new widgets for all the CISA vulnerabilities, so you can essentially create your own custom reports. And then we basically have agent performance management, so you can manage your agent performance either at a global or company level. So this talks about how basically you want to kind of set it up for different companies, so you can essentially kind of change the settings across different companies. Earlier, you had to do this in one place, and it was basically applicable to all the probes. So now we've given you the ability to define it on a per probe basis and take this over. The ability to kind of remove any of the like in case you want to kind of delete any of the PII scan detections, then that's something that you can essentially do over here. So again, you can do a bulk delete of all of the PII scan detections that are required. The attack surface, we've essentially modeled it right now based on the external scan. So you can essentially kind of add a domain. You can basically get it to look at all of the attack surface. And then once you add it, you basically want it to scan in the job. You can essentially see the results over here. And then when you click on the results, it actually kind of shows you all of the data. And then you can click on each one of these and get the data, and you can download it too. So it follows the external scan mapper mechanism. We have some updates which basically are there on the attack surface scanner. Plus, essentially, with the new version, we are releasing what is the what we're calling as the web scanner, which is basically powered by I don't know if a lot of you have seen, there's a project which is called the Project Discovery. And we have worked with Project Discovery and Nuclei to essentially bring in a whole bunch of tests into the system. And now we will be able to run those tests across your system. So eventually we'll be able to provide the entire suite of pen testing plus essentially web scanning in the same tool. So since we bring the nuclei and the nuclear templates into the system, we'll be able to kind of give that kind of flexibility going forward. Okay. So next, basically moving on to what we are talking about first, V3 update. So we are in a state where we are ready to roll out beta. We've essentially kind of created accounts for all of the people who signed up for the beta and everything is ready. We are waiting on the whitelisting of our agent on 3 EDR platforms, because if we essentially release the agent today, it is going to set off alarms in different places. And we've learned this the hard way when we basically were much smaller, but now that we have a larger community, we have to take care of this. So if you look at this, what happened is Microsoft flagged us as basically kind of as malicious because of their sandbox. And we have basically submitted it to Microsoft. And they basically have said that it basically is not malicious, and they will essentially kind of work to remove it from that database. There is also basically a couple of detections that have come from ESET. So we're working with them to essentially kind of remove it from their database. So once these detections are basically clean, that's when we can essentially release it out, because that basically means that when you put it in your environment or your customer's environment, it will not basically trip off any EDRs or any of the MDRs. We still might need some whitelisting to be done, but we at least have to make sure that at least from a virus total and all of these standard scanners perspective, it does not, it meets all this thing. So we have all of these tickets which are raised with all of the vendors, and we are making sure that this basically says that it is clean, so that we don't have a discussion about it once we basically make this release. So one of the things is that, like, we have made a few modifications in terms of once you get into the new user interface, you have all of the risk scores. And then one of the things with the whole things with assets, etc., is that the asset detail view has been completely modified from what you saw last week with all the risk score and all of the details out here, including the BIOS information. But I think one of the cool things that I wanted to point out to all of you is one of the things that a lot of people forget, and basically then it keeps coming back to us as tickets, and it's a way for us to also basically kind of prevent these tickets from coming, which is this line here talks about whether a system requires a reboot. So if it basically has a red icon, it means that a reboot is pending, and it also marks out since when was this reboot pending. So this way, when you look at something which says that the vulnerability is not remediated, why is it not remediated? Then you can essentially very quickly see this, and you can understand that since it has not been rebooted, the patch has not taken effect. So that basically will give you the guidance to basically quickly go into this. And as we said, we have all of the port software. And one of the significant things that we've essentially done is that we are basically now managing all the Windows firewall rules from within the system. So you can actually see all of the ports that are opened, both inbound and outbound, and all of the data basically here, and any changes that happen to your firewall rules on the on your Windows system or Linux system or Mac system is basically kind of pulled together. So apart from your network firewalls, all of your end system firewalls are also basically getting managed, and all of those policies also will be audited. And if those policies are anything like wide open, then it will essentially kind of highlight those as configuration errors that basically are in there. So that is basically something that we have also added. The next thing that I want to quickly talk about is that while we had done a lot of work with all the firewalls, Cisco Meraki, one of the things that is very popular among all of you, one of the things that we didn't do last time and which we are doing now is both with Cisco Meraki, with Unify, and all of the other vendors, is that we are basically pulling the complete asset list of all of those devices in here, and not just the firewall. So you can essentially see all of the devices and all of the things which basically we are pulling from your Meraki integration. And then those assets are discovered and correlated with what we see in the field. So we will actually be able to give you a true picture of what we see in the field versus what we see in from an API integration perspective. This also basically will be, as I said, will work with Unify because we're integrating with Unify controllers and with also Aruba, and we'll be integrating with other vendors also as basically time progresses. But this essentially will bring all this together. Last but not the least, I just wanted to point out now, basically, once you people will have access to the agent once we basically, as I said, whitelisted. That will be for the initial set of folks. They give us feedback. We will be fixing it up. And once we are confident that everybody seems to be happy with what they are seeing with the new portal, the way that this entire procedure will go is that all of your user accounts, companies, etc., will automatically be migrated to the new instance. However, all the agents and the data related to assets, etc., will be migrated by you when you basically are okay with it. So you can essentially migrate one company at a time or multiple companies at a time. And when you click on this migrate, it will essentially kind of take you from this portal into the new portal. It will migrate the data, it will migrate the agent over, and you will be able to see all of the data back in there. So that essentially is how the migration is going to happen. And so it will basically be something that will be entirely in your control. And once we basically are able to kind of release the system into GA, which we are hoping, I've been speaking to our teams in terms of the documentation and some of the things that will be happening. And Srikanth tells me that we probably will be in mid-November, November 15th to 20th, when we'll be making that release. So we will give you a full 90-day period in which you can essentially choose to migrate. Post that 90 days, we basically will be migrating you over there, because I think in 90 days we can do, and what we'll be doing over the course of that 90 days is we will be having weekly 2 sessions, which essentially will talk about how to use the new portal effectively and what are this thing. These will be webinars. Anyone will be free to attend. So we will do this twice a week till basically everybody is trained completely. So I will basically set up the calendar and send it out to everyone. And please feel free to get your folks onto the webinar. We will train them, we will record them, and we will essentially provide those videos. Plus, we will have Ryan and team basically provide you with excellent documentation so that you're completely handheld during this particular process. But this is how we essentially plan to do this, so that it is completely in your control. You can choose when and how you want to essentially migrate. And you will have a full 90-day period during which we will basically kind of maintain both the systems for you, so that you are fully comfortable and you basically when you migrate. Last but not the least, what we also want to do is, like with the current portal, there was a little bit of all the time a question of like, how much am I being charged? What is it, etc. So we have a complete plan and billing section over here, and you can essentially see what is the current month, what is your current tier, what is your billing summary, what is the forecast, all of these pieces. And then in the insights, we also basically show you on a per company basis how many assets you have. And also basically there'll be a breakdown of what are those different kinds of assets when you click on this. And we have something which is called an accrued cost, which basically says what is the cost because you're managing this company, what is the cost that is basically accruing to you. So this can be used to essentially kind of push this data to any system where you can basically then look at it and say, okay, how much am I spending for this client versus how much am I getting for this client? That's a very easy calculation that essentially you can make. So this basically is the update for the week. So I will stop here, and then we can talk of any questions that we can.
I have a question or comment. I think all this stuff looks great, and I don't think anyone in this call would disagree with that. I've talked to some partners offline, and there's frustrations with communication. We understand how development works, right? We know there's hiccups. We know things get delayed. I personally feel like we have not been given enough information, You know, we were told over and over and over again, October was the cutover date for some of us. The rest of us would be due over. Then there just wasn't any information. And the only emails we get is saying development's buttoning up this process, right? To me, that's not enough information. I don't need to know the in and outs of what you all are doing or what your struggles are in your back end. But I think as partners, we should be let know, especially when something not necessarily was promised, but we were given a roadmap and a time, and that just wasn't done. And then there was this radio silence, and we're having to reach out to our account managers and ask, what's going on with this? Are we getting this soon? I feel like the communication side is very lacking on this whole process. Is there anything you guys are going to do to remediate that? Maybe more emails stating, hey, this is what we're doing, this is our timeline, anything along those lines?
So, Kevin, I think that's a very fair point. And basically that has been our weakness for some time now. So what I will do is that I will take this feedback back, and then what we will do is that starting from today, we will basically provide two emails every week, one on at the beginning of the week and one at the end of the week, in terms of where we are to all of the partners. And we will make sure that everybody is aware fully of what are this thing. And as I said, we like to be very transparent with all of the issues. So for example, we basically have a whitelisting problem. We would like to very clearly state it's a whitelisting problem, and we don't have a problem with stating it. And if there's a mistake on our side, we absolutely accept that there is a mistake on our side. And in this particular case, what you're saying is extremely true in terms of communication. Yes. And I understand basically where we have faltered in this particular case, but I will take the responsibility that going forward, every Monday and Friday, you will get an email which essentially gives you the exact status of where we are, what are the things which are done, what are the things which are not done, and what is the path for migration. All of that will be communicated in these emails, which will happen on Monday and Friday. And we will have the Wednesday call where we can essentially, you can ask me questions about it.
Awesome. That's perfect. Thank you. Appreciate that.
Quick question. I may have joined late or missed something, but just for the prediction of when this will be released, are we now saying mid-November is when the new version will be released?
The mid-November is when the general availability will be there. But for all the partners who have signed up for early access, we are, as I said, we are just waiting for the whitelisting from these folks, the Microsoft and ESET. And I think there are two more vendors. They have to whitelist us. The moment they whitelist us, we will be able to give access to the early access folks.
Okay. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I just to echo what Kevin said, I mean, all the stuff looks great, and we're like super excited over here. My team, we're really new to this product, so we've been having ongoing issues with the current version, and we feel like the information is not updating. It's not, what we're getting isn't usable because it's not accurate, and we don't feel like that's being addressed. But we've been waiting patiently for the new one, saying, well, it's going to be fixed, it's going to be fixed. But we keep paying every month, but essentially we have an unusable product. And when we go to support, we don't feel like what the issues we have are being addressed. So I'm at a point now where I'm like, I don't understand. I mean, I've waited patiently for months, and now, if I understand correctly, I'm being asked to wait at least another month. So I'm kind of at a point where, I mean, we either need to cancel and then maybe revisit this product when you guys actually get it working, or we need someone to fix the issues we're having now, because we can't even provide accurate info to our customers.
So John, the answer is like, I will give you two answers to this. One is I need to understand what are the specific issues you're facing. So I will have Suraj on my team work with me tomorrow to exactly understand the issues, and you will get an answer on every single, if there is a ticket, every single ticket, I will take it and I will look at it and I will basically give you a response in 24 hours. Okay. That is the first commitment that I will make. Second, I believe that I've been talking to multiple partners and basically walking through what their systems are. We are basically seeing that all of those systems are functioning, and basically they are giving reports to their customers, and it is working. So I need to understand in your specific case what is not working, and what are the shortcomings that basically you're facing. And we will rest assured, if it is something that needs to be fixed in the existing one, I will be, whether it takes the weekend, whether it takes days and nights, I will sit and fix it and give it back to you. So please, and for everyone on this call, right, if you really are feeling this way in terms of basically saying that, oh, I'm a little lost with this whole thing, the simplest thing that you can do is to essentially send me a mail, which is shiva@connectsecure.com. I will basically personally take it upon me to fix every single problem that you have. And I'm sure that lots of people have approached me. I have always gone back to you with a solution. If there is a problem, I will give you the solution and I will close it. Most of the times that we see issues come in is because of environmental issues. That is, something is not open, something is not happening, something is failing on the environment. And then we have to essentially kind of work through that process to basically fix that particular thing in the environment. I'll just give you a simple example. Last week, basically, I had two very irate folks who basically came to me and said, oh, your external scan does not work. And basically, I'm seeing, second thing which I'm seeing is that I'm seeing your probe is trying to contact my internal servers. And basically, that is not how it is supposed to function. And then when I essentially kind of debugged it, it was essentially an issue where the firewall, the way that the firewall was configured, when we were resolving the external host name, it was resolving to an internal IP and it was hitting the firewall on the internal interface. So these are problems that we cannot, we can only solve with experience and we can only look at it. So as I said, John, be rest assured, if the product has not worked for you for whatever reason, I'm the first person who will refund your entire cost for whatever period it has not worked. But more importantly, I want to understand what is the specific issue. I will sit with Suraj tomorrow. We will go through exactly the tickets that you have. My only request is just drop your email ID in a one-on-one message to me, and I will essentially get back to you with what are the problems, what are the resolutions, and if anything needs to be fixed, it will be fixed by me.
Thank you for that. And as I mentioned, we're new, so other partners may not be having this issue. So if I understand you correctly, we're going to open a support issue, and if our issue isn't addressed pretty quickly, then we're going to bring you in, or we're going to just reach out to you directly going forward.
Just reach out to me directly. I will take care of this.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
So I think one of the questions basically was from Adam in terms of dual versions for self-hosted as well. Yes, Adam, if you're able to provide us another machine, yes, we will be able to kind of push this version into another machine. But if you want to wait for the upgrade of your existing machine, we will basically put it on the existing machine.
Oh, I do have a question, and I apologize. I came into this late, and so I'm not going to ask you to recap stuff you've already said, but I get the invite to this, but I don't seem to get the recording when it's over. Are you sending out a recording of this to everyone when it's done?
The recordings are basically there on a YouTube channel. I will basically I'll ask Rishali to post the link to it. So all the partner calls are on a YouTube channel.
Oh, okay. Okay. So we can just search for that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dennis, the release of the V3 agent and the UI are connected. Yes, because the kind of information and the way that the information is collected in the new agent is fundamentally changing. And as I explained before, it is also a real-time agent. So it basically kind of listens to events, and the entire structure of the V3 UI is driven towards handling those events and basically kind of showing summaries and problems and information. So that's one of the reasons for why basically that UI, the backend engine, and basically the agent release is basically is intricately linked. think all of the other the same. And as far as communication, as I promised, we'll basically do two emails every week with the status, which is basically on Monday and Friday, and we have the Wednesday call. So we will make sure that this communication is basically kept up, and basically we will move forward with making sure that we fix this part of communication for everyone. Adam, the answer for that is basically .NET vulnerabilities. Now, there are certain versions of .NET which basically are marked as end of life. And this is something that constantly keeps plaguing us, right? Because there are certain end of life versions that Microsoft continues to support. Now, the problem is that we usually do not essentially mark end of life vulnerabilities as vulnerabilities and basically kind of put them over there. But then when everybody else benchmarks us against some of our competitors like Qualys and Tenable, etc., who basically put this out, they feel that we are not giving that information. And in fact, I've replied to multiple people today, just today, because this is a very fundamental problem, right? Because what we are trying to do is that we are forcing a lot of our partners to do things that they don't need to do immediately and take care of priorities versus basically just saying that you have end of life software. Okay, you have end of life software, but it's not, let's be honest, like there are tons of people, like if you look at Honeywell and all of those companies, they still run Windows 7 systems, and basically they seem to be fine with it because they say that it's isolated. Now, the point is that, yeah, if there is a vulnerability that is discovered on any of the end-of-life software, we will essentially bring it up and say that the remediation is there is no version, you have to uninstall it and you have to basically migrate to a new product. But if the product is end of life, it does not immediately mean that you're vulnerable, etc. The problem is that since we are benchmarked against all of the competitors, our team has to add all of these .NET vulnerabilities into play, although there are no technical vulnerabilities on top of it. So, Chris, is there a publicly available roadmap for CS? We are basically, honestly speaking, we've not had the time to essentially kind of put that roadmap together because we're working on V3. We will essentially come up with a full roadmap in the month of December once this release is completed. And we will publish a 6-month roadmap, and then we can take it from there, and we will take inputs from all of you. So perfect. So if there are no more questions, then I want to thank every one of you for your time today. And more importantly, I will basically make sure that we get you the emails on Monday and Friday, and we will have the call next Wednesday to basically further communicate on all of this stuff. Thank you very much.